The 18 Strong Podcast, episode number 148 with Tony Gentilcore, strength coach and fitness writer extraordinaire.
A lot of people with lower back pain or have a history of lower back pain actually have strong lower backs because they use their lower back for everything.
Right, yeah.
Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, where you get direct access to the world's greatest experts on training harder, practicing smarter, and playing better golf. Now, here's your host, Jeff Pellizzero.
Hello and welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Pellizzero, where it's our mission every week to interview some of the most influential people in the world of golf, fitness, nutrition. And this week is no exception. We have Tony Gentilcore, who is one of the extraordinary writers in the world of fitness. Tony's one of the co-founders of Cressy Sports Performance, where he served as a strength coach from 2007 to 2015. He now owns and operates his own training studio in Boston, Massachusetts, called Core. In addition, he writes for many reputable fitness publications like Men's Health, Women's Health, T-Nation, Bodybuilding.com, and Stack. In fact, you'll hear in the interview, Tony has written more blog posts probably than anyone I personally know, and you'll find most of his content at his website, TonyGentilcore.com. I was extremely excited to get Tony on the show and be able to talk to him about several different things that relate to golf. Tony's background is really in baseball and working with baseball players, but now works with quite a few recreational golfers. But Tony is definitely known for simply helping athletes become bigger, stronger, better versions of their previous selves. So I thought it'd be great to bring him on the show and be able to talk about some things that relate to both golf, baseball, and just everything regarding lifting heavy stuff. So some of the topics that we talk about, specifically, we get into the deadlift pretty seriously and just discussing the importance of learning to hinge and being able to get in certain positions for your golf swing and why this exercise is so good, but why some people may have some qualms with it or feel like it might be a bit of a stressful exercise and who and when you should be doing this exercise. We also talk just about lifting heavy stuff. That's one of Tony's favorite things to write about. And so we had to get into some of the basic scientific research as to why is it so important that you, no matter what age you are, whether you're a youngster or whether you are a senior citizen, why you should be challenging yourself and lifting heavier things and what long-term repercussions or long-term benefits that has. And then, of course, we discuss the back, the hips, the shoulders. Tony is one of the co-creators of the Complete Shoulder and Hip Blueprint with Dean Somerset, who we had on the show a few episodes back. And so we just kind of discuss the importance of all these pieces and, what are some of the things that we should be worried about and concerned about when looking at our bodies and looking at our golf swing. And then probably one of the most beneficial pieces of this episode, which I know you guys and girls are going to love, is Tony walks us through basically what he would prescribe as the regular guys or girls workout prescription. If you're somebody that has a job, you love to play golf, but you have other responsibilities, he breaks down pretty much for the week what you should include in there and what are the most important components, which I thought he did a fantastic job of just succinctly laying it out and simplifying it for us. You know how we like to keep it simple here at 18 Strong. I want to take a quick second just to thank our sponsor for this week's episode, which is the PGA Tour mobile app. I'm telling you, this is very quickly becoming one of the most used apps on my phone as I'm constantly trying to keep up to date with what's going on tour, and especially this past weekend as my buddy Adam Long, who's a friend, a client, and a local St. Louis guy, placed third in the web.com event. And since I was only able to watch a little bit of it on TV this weekend, it was great to be able to keep lifetime view of what he was doing, how many birdies he was throwing down, and to watch him shoot an 8 under on the final day with the lowest score of the day to solidify the third place finish. So the PGA Tour mobile app is awesome. It lets you track players. It lets you have your favorite players. So I know that Adam's, every time I pop it open, I know exactly where Adam is because it's right at the top of the screen. So it's just a great resource to be able to keep track of what's going on, both web.com, PGA Tour, and all the other tours that you can imagine on the weekend. So go to your app store, whether you're an Apple user, Android, BlackBerry, whatever it is, you can find the PGA Tour mobile app. All right, let's get to Tony and start talking about how lifting heavy things is going to make you a better golfer and just a better human being overall. Tony, welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast. So great to have you on, bud.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm finally it's good that we could finally connect.
Absolutely. So for the audience, if you don't know Tony, he's a strength coach, fitness writer. You write, obviously you write on your blog and you have tons of content there, but you write all over the place. How do you do it?
I don't know. It's funny because a lot of people bring that up when I travel. Like, how do you do so much writing? And I don't realize I do it. Because it's just part of my daily schedule. So it's kind of normal to me. I've been kind of normalized to it. But now that I think about it, I have to pat myself on the back.
For sure.
I think I did the math, and I believe I've surpassed 2,000 blog posts on my website. So,
holy cow.
But that's context. It's over the course of like 10 years. So,
sure.
It's not like I did it in a year, I get my name out there. So it's people, I'm in demand, which never sucks.
Yeah. I mean, it's impressive knowing, just the consistency and how much time it takes. A lot of people don't see the behind the scenes on that. So
especially
very
now. It's a little bit different with a young one. It takes it's harder to get it in, but I try my best.
Yeah, 5 months. You got a new 5-month-old.
5 months, yeah.
Now you're on our team, man. Now you're a team of
team dad
time stories and all that kind of stuff. Well, I'm so excited to have you on here because you're kind of known as a guy that knows everything about the deadlift and lifting heavy things, and so we're going to talk about a lot of those things. It sounds like you have some serious lightsaber skills, so I think that's going to carry over into the golf world a little bit.
Yes.
So I'm excited to hear about some of those things. But
I'm always game for Star Wars references. Thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, so I won't be able to throw.
I will cut this interview off right now.
Well, all right. We'll catch up with you guys next week. All right. If you could, Tony, just give us a little background on you. How your career kind of started and just kind of a quick synopsis of what brought you to where you are and kind of how you spend your days today.
I'm gonna try to keep this under 30 minutes. Talking about myself. How I got started, like everyone, I got my first weight set at a young age, 13 or so. Kind of got the weightlifting bug, which parlayed into athletics and sports, specifically baseball. I played 4 years of collegiate baseball. Ended up getting a degree in health education, became a personal trainer, and did that for about 3 to 5 years. I worked in a commercial gym setting, met a chap named Eric Cressy, which I think most people recognize the name.
Sure.
And he and I worked together in Connecticut for about a year. And then we both moved to Boston. We lived together, but kind of worked in separate gyms. And after a year of that, we ended up opening up Cressy Sports Performance out in just outside Boston in Hudson, Massachusetts, and did that for 8 years. And I left there in the fall of 2015, and I now run my own little studio in Boston that I named Core. And I train. I went from a facility where I train a lot of professional athletes, particularly baseball players, a lot of rotational athletes. But that you can pepper in some golfers in there,
sure.
Basketball, any sport. Now I have to say 90% of my clients are Gen Pop, but of which are a number of them are golfers.
Nice.
I do a fair bit of fitness writing. So I've been fortunate enough to be within the reputable fitness publication circles like Men's Health and T Nation. And I do a fair amount of speaking too around the country and around the world, that's very cool. Like being able to travel the country and travel the world and speak is a big honor, particularly being from a very, 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 very small town. That's it in a nutshell. Pretty vanilla, but that's what it is.
No, it's perfect. And we had, as you know, we had one of your partners in crime on the show a few episodes ago. I think episode 142, we had Dean on. And
who's that guy? I don't know who that is.
Well, your name is on a product called the Complete Shoulder and Hip Blueprint with him, so I think you have a little bit to know.
He's kind of smart.
He's a very smart dude. So we talked about some great stuff, and we're going to kind of elaborate on a little bit more of what we talked about in that episode. And with your background in baseball, playing and working with so many baseball players, and just the whole rotational thing, I think this will be a fun conversation with golf. Kind of the one big thing that I wanted to talk to you about and get into some depth with today, because you are kind of known as the guy who knows all about the deadlift. You teach on it, you teach coaches on it, you teach clients on it. But I also read on your blog that, and I didn't really realize this, there's a lot of people out there that say that the deadlift is bad. And so there's kind of these competing, two competing sides. And there's certain populations that may think one or the other. So first of all, just kind of give us your general thoughts around the deadlift. How important is it? Mm-hmm. Is it something that all of us should be doing? Or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think to start that conversation, because you kind of said it, there are a fair number of people out there that they'll say, and they'll make their case, like, this is why the deadlift is bad, it's bad for everyone. I just don't like blanket statements, because a lot of those same people will say it's bad for everyone.
Right.
So anytime I see these three words, everyone, always, and never, my bullshit meter kind of starts going pretty high, because that usually just means someone has an agenda, there's confirmation bias, there's some kind of nefarious rationale for why they are gravitating to that end of the spectrum. And I just don't like it when people make blatant statements like that. And the deadlift kind of gets that quite often, where someone will say, oh, no, everyone should avoid it. It's bad for your spine. And yeah, it is when someone doesn't take the proper progressions, doesn't do the right variation, uses too much load for their ability level. They hit a threshold, and they aren't coached well on it. Like, any exercise can be dangerous when it's done inappropriately. So I always feel like it's a really lame argument to make, because it's always in context. Because I can make the case for a bicep curl, I can make the case for the leg press, I can for the squat, anything. Everyone's gotten hurt on every exercise in some way. So to say that the deadlift is always going to be bad and everyone should avoid it, I feel is a bit reductionist to say, and very narrow-minded. And I just remind people that we're really talking about the hip hinge,
right?
When we talk about the deadlift. And I think another reason why people tend to think that it's dangerous is that they automatically assume that we're referring to a heavy deadlift with a straight bar on the ground. And that is not the case, because we could be talking about a kettlebell deadlift. We could be talking about a trap bar deadlift. It could just be a pull through. It could just be a body weight hip hinge. That is a deadlift, and we're keeping a neutral spine while we learn to dissociate hip movement from lumbar movement.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that we immediately go to 300-pound deadlift from the floor.
Exactly. Yeah.
Lifting until like that Saturday Night Live skit where your arms pop off and you go screaming.
Well, I think people, they look at the videos of very strong powerlifters doing a deadlift, and I think it's cool. You would think it's cool. And a lot of people think when they hear the word deadlift, that's what they think we're referring to, a 900-pound deadlift. Like, right. Oh my God, and that's not what we're referring to. I mean, maybe eventually someone will get that strong over the course of 20 years. But there's progressions. I mean, that's why we use assessment. I try to match what variation matches their injury history, matches their anatomy, matches their ability level, and we progress from there. I think any competent coach will progress and scale the movement accordingly, and then in a non-dangerous way. So I think, and I find it hard to believe that people can argue that, and people still do, but that, I guess that, I don't know. That's when I kind of shut them off and just move on to my life.
So what? Looking at the golfers, obviously, because that's the population I'm talking with, and of course, any athlete, any human being, why is there so much emphasis put on the deadlift? Can you kind of explain some of the big benefits that we're going to get just by learning that proper hinge and
well, I think with rotational athletes in general, they if they don't have a lot of experience with strength and conditioning, and they haven't been working with a good personal trainer or a good strength coach, they tend to get movement from the wrong areas of their body and within that swing. So I think as well as I do that every golfer ever always has low back pain at some point, or at least they complain about it. And I think the ones that tend to not get it or tend to get to the point where it's greatly reduced or doesn't happen as often are the ones that learn to get movement from the right areas. They learn to hinge, they learn to move from the hip, and to get and to make a more for lack of a better term, a bulletproof spine. So they're getting motions from the right areas through the T-spine, through their hips, and not their lower back. And that's not to say that we don't want the lower back to move. Like that's not what I'm saying. But we need to be able to, if you look at the biomechanics of it, there isn't a lot of range of motion in the lumbar spine as far as its rotational capacity. And the T-spine is way more, and that's where we want to get the bulk of that rotation from. And we have to keep that lumbar spine pretty stable and be able to move through the hips and not the lower back. So that's kind of where I feel the deadlift has its power with golfers.
And what are some of the do's and don'ts that you would say, or let's go with the don'ts. What are some of the things that you see people doing improperly that may cause some of those worrisome things and may lead to some of those injuries and things we need to be aware of? Maybe if you don't have a coach watching over you, but you can kind of check yourself in the mirror, because a lot of the folks listening are the folks that are going to take the initiative to go in the gym and do this stuff on their own and try new things. But what should they really pay attention to the most?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of different ways of coaching the deadlift. But there's certainly some tenets that I feel people should gravitate towards as far as like preventing themselves from getting hurt. So a big one, is going to be not rounding their back. Particularly their lower back when they're deadlifting, especially under load. Unloaded flexion, not that big of a deal. Like I would advocate that we need to be able to do that. But when we start adding load and significant load on top of that, and then repetition, we kind of want to lock that bad boy in. And again, get movement via the hips and learn to use our hips correctly. Learn to get tension. So your lower back isn't doing the bulk of the work, because it's kind of paradoxical, because a lot of people with lower back pain or have a history of lower back pain actually have strong lower backs because they use their lower back for everything.
Right, yeah.
If we can teach them to do a proper hip hinge and a deadlift, they kind of learn to turn their abs on and learn to use their glutes and get their glutes stronger, get their hamstrings stronger, get some core stability, kind of to take away from the lower back so it isn't doing so much work. Some good things are going to happen. That to me is like tenet number one. It's just that upper lower back rounding on the deadlift, or loaded flexion would be like the big one that we want to avoid. And then from there, really, it's just about picking the proper progression based off somebody's mobility, their access to the mobility, or like what mobility restrictions they may have. Because honestly, I tend to start everyone off with either a kettlebell deadlift or a trap bar deadlift, just because I know that that's going to be a more user-friendly variation for people to get used to. Their center of mass is right in the middle of the bar. Their axis of rotation, their hips are closer to the bar. It's just a more user-friendly way of introducing, a less intimidating way of introducing the deadlift. Like I'm referring to the trap bar.
Sure.
As opposed to like a straight bar. People look at that like, what the hell do you want me to lift that? So those would be kind of like the big don'ts, would be that flexion. And then don't just assume that you have to use a straight bar. Because honestly, there aren't many people that walk in on day one with me that are deadlifting a straight bar. It just doesn't happen. Maybe after a couple weeks, maybe a month, we would use it. But unless you're a competitive power lifter or a competitive Olympic lifter, you don't have to use a straight bar. Like there's not somebody walking around in gyms across America going to call you out for using a trap bar. You're going to get all the benefits of the deadlift, but usually in a much more safer range of motion and more user-friendly way of deadlifting.
Yeah, I like that you have kind of specified that you can use different modes, because I think there's intimidation there. Not just the heavy part of it, but going into a gym and pulling the big bar out. And a lot of people just aren't going to do that. A lot of people don't have those facilities even, and don't necessarily realize that you can do this stuff. You can do it with a PVC pipe. You can do it with some dumbbells and those kinds of things. And just working on just the basic mechanics that, are going to make that hinge better. So no matter whether you're using it loaded or unloaded, if you're improving your hinge, you're improving your hinge. And I think that's an important distinction.
And people, even when we talk about like kettlebells, like I think that's people's home base for a lot of people's home base for quite a while, for a couple months, really. Like I know there's another coach here in the Boston area, Mike Perry, who owns a gym called Skill of Strength. And he says, like, in order that for people to graduate to a barbell, they have to be lifting X amount of weight with the kettlebell. I forget the exact number. Like, I don't want to misquote him, but he says you have to earn the right to use a barbell of any sort. You have to be able to own this weight with the kettlebell before you're able to graduate to the next progression, which I think is a smart way of doing it. That's his system and works for him. And if you think about it, it's kind of brilliant because, the likelihood that anyone's going to get hurt is pretty low. Right. And he's making it, he's building competency with people and confidence. I think that's the important part of the deadlift too is, like you said, people get intimidated and they're like, oh, well, I don't know if I can do that. But if you start them with the lowest common denominator, with a kettlebell, with a dumbbell, with a basic PVC, wherever they are, you got to meet where they are. And build some competency, and build success, then it's the ceiling. There's really no ceiling where they could go with it.
Yeah, and you also brought up a good point that because you have back pain doesn't mean that your back is the problem.
Exactly.
In fact, often, like you said, because other things aren't working, it's almost like that area is taking up the slack, and could be the strongest portion. So being able to do something unloaded and look at the body and see, okay, what's not working here, and give yourself a little bit of an assessment, again, without a lot of weight or load. I want to kind of dive in a little bit of a different direction because, I love on your website where it says, what is it? Because the weights aren't going to lift themselves or
close,
something like that. I had it earlier.
No, it's because heavy things won't lift themselves.
Yeah, because heavy things won't lift themselves. Yeah. Why is it important that we lift heavy stuff? Because I totally agree that it is. And I know that there's studies that show reasons for it, especially in an aging population. But what are some of the reasons why you're so emphatic on people getting in there and lifting some heavy things?
And that is subjective too, right? So what's strong to me is going to be different to every person that walks in the door of my facility and everywhere. So, a great example would be like when I go to a Cirque du Soleil show and I watch those contortionist people like be able to hold their body in a certain position and like a flagstaff position with their feet like perpendicular to the pole and then to the floor, and I'm like, that's strong. Like that, and then of course when I watch somebody pull 3 to 4 times body weight off the floor, like that's strong too. But in the context of this, like sports and golf and life in general, I think the getting stronger is going to prevent a lot of bad things from happening. Brett Contreras has a very quotable quote where he'll say, like, he'll go back to like somebody saying a deadlift is dangerous or a squat is dangerous or whatever is dangerous. And his blowback is basically to say, well, being weak is dangerous. People get hurt a lot of times because they're weak and they're unable to tolerate load and repetition and movement. And because they live in this bubble wrap society, like, I have to lift lightweight for high reps. And that has a time and place, but certainly in the context of somebody who's injured, that's different. But as far as like lifting, I think just lifting appreciable weight that challenges you, we could go into the physics of Davis's law and Wolff's law. Like your soft tissue is going to adapt to the load placed upon it. Your bones are going to adapt to the loads placed upon it. That's getting stronger. You're just going to hopefully make your body a little bit more resilient to injury. When you talk about golf, 18 holes is no joke. And not to mention like the amount of repetition that these men and women do over and over and over again, pattern overload, the same pattern over and over and over again, stuff's going to break down. So getting stronger will hopefully prevent that from happening sooner, if at all. So that to me is kind of the selling point amongst other things that getting stronger is gonna work for, or be of benefit for.
Yeah, and is it true? I think I've read this where, especially in an aging population, adding resistance, adding weight is actually very beneficial in regards to balance and preventing falls. And I know the population listening here is probably a little bit younger than that, but I think it's important to get this in our mindset early on to realize. And this is one of those things that I'm constantly kind of like nudging my parents on, like, hey, you need to start doing some of this stuff, not because you want to look better in a swimsuit or something like that, but because this is important for just everyday life.
It's life, exactly. Like, one thing that a term that I've used in the past that you can get from the NSCA Strength Essentials book is minimal essential strain. Like, there's got to be a minimal essential strain on the body in order for it to adapt. Lifting a pink dumbbell 30 times is not going to do anything. I mean, I shouldn't say that, because for some people, yes, that is going to elicit a training response. But let's be honest, for a healthy individual who is active, you got to be lifting some appreciable weight in order to see anything happen. So, and again, it just comes down to resiliency and preventing the body from breaking down. Because you're right. To me, it isn't always about aesthetics and like hitting X number on the squat or deadlift. I mean, I think those are cool. Those are important goals to have. Like, performance-based goals, I think, is huge. But and again, getting stronger is subjective. But there's a lot of life. What's the word I'm looking for? There's just a lot of value in it. That's about as simple as I can put it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just day-to-day functional type stuff is you're going to benefit. I mean, we got to lift our kids, we got to lift luggage, we got to do that kind of stuff. And let's take a quick second here to thank our sponsor for today's episode, which is radroller.com. If you've been listening to the 18 Strong podcast for a little while now, you know that Rad Roller is our choice of soft tissue myofascial release tools for pretty much all of your needs. We know that we need to move better in order to play better golf. We know that we need to work on our bodies and get the tissues moving, get our muscles and our joints moving much better in order to do the things that the golf swing requires from our body. And one of the ways that I recommend doing that is using some of the different tools from Rad Roller. They've got the Helix, they've got the Rad Rod, they've got the different Rad Rollers, they've got the rounds. All of these different tools are meant to be used on different parts of your body in order to facilitate the muscles, the tissue moving a little bit better, breaking up some of the adhesions that are in your tissue and under the skin that are causing some of those limitations that don't allow you to do what you want to do in your swing. So if you want to know more about the Rad Roller products, all you have to do is go to radroller.com, take a look around. I'm sure you're going to love what you see. And once you decide to load up your cart, don't forget to use the code 18STRONG to get yourself a discount. All right, let's get back to Tony.
Like, just think about, like, when somebody has back pain and someone goes to like shake their hand or like do like a quick, like they jump into their arms, or I mean, that's can be brutal for some people, and lifting weights, strength and conditioning can help make that not a thing where it just happens. Like, that's life. I mean, it's so, like, life is unpredictable. So, you take a predictable environment in the weight room and you try to make yourself a little bit more resilient for the more unpredictable stuff that's going to happen, crossing the street or playing 18 holes of golf or doing whatever. So, it's something we can argue over and over and over again. And, eventually it's going to win people over, I hope.
Yeah, hopefully one of these days. What are some of the crossovers that you saw between your baseball days and working with so many baseball and rotational athletes? What are some of the things that you've taken from training with those guys who, obviously very explosive athletes, to also then working with the golfer, and whether that be a very high level golfer or your more recreational golfer?
Yeah. I mean, really working on, like, with baseball, it's a lot different than golfers, because in baseball, a lot of those guys, especially at the high level, are very hypermobile. They're very lax, and which could be a blessing and a curse. Like, it could be great because it allows them to get that crazy retroverted position, that laid back position to throw a baseball the way they do. I mean, if you ever see a still shot of a pitcher throwing a baseball, like their arm, it's like The Exorcist. Like, their arm is like,
it's
you
gross.
would think, like, how the hell is the arm doing that? That's retroversion. That's a bony adaptation of the joint to be able to get that much layback. And a lot of those guys, they're crazy flexible. And it can be a curse, because if they're unable to control that range of motion, that's where we start getting labral tears and, breaking down. So again, that, going back to why getting stronger is important, it prevents that from happening too. We have to be able to control ranges of motion. Working with golfers, in my experience, like admittedly, I haven't worked with as many as you, but in my experience, they tend to be the tin man. At least, and I've never worked with an elite level golfer. I'm sure they're a little bit more pliable, but the ones that I work with are, the type A individuals. They're lawyers and doctors, and they play golf on the weekends, and they play a lot of golf, but they just don't move well. They have very little T-spine extension or mid-back extension. They actually have very little rotation, either to left or right side. They don't have very mobile hips, and they're just kind of stuck in flexion because they sit at a desk all day. So my job as their coach is to kind of open them up a little bit, improve that rotation, but doing it in a way that helps them feel like an athlete. Like, I think I went from a facility that worked with a lot of professional athletes, where obviously we're doing a lot of cool things. We're doing prowler pushes and med ball throws and kettlebell swings and lifting heavy stuff. I still do the same on my Gen Pop clients. It's just scaled down a little bit, right? So I've yet to meet an individual coming from an office job, not love throwing a med ball against a wall.
Right.
It makes them feel athletic. It lets them get a little aggression. They feel like an athlete. And not to mention, like, when we're doing stuff like that, med ball throws, and I'm coaching them up to make sure they're getting the movement from the right areas, like that is producing power, and it's vector specific to a golf swing, right? They're using their hips. They're getting that rotation. So just little stuff like that goes a long way with a lot of the Gen Pop golfers that I work with. And then, of course, it's catering their warm up to, like, oh yeah, we got to open up their hips, and we have to do some, articular rotation stuff in their hips and stuff like that. Like, and building stability too. Like, I feel like with a lot of, again, it's one of those oxymoron things where, rotational athletes seem to be able to prevent rotation before we train it. Core stability. So, I've all the time, I have guys coming in and women who are golfers, and they just have very little stability in their core. And again, they're unstable. Like, a lot of what's perceived as tightness. Like, I might assess somebody and they present as really tight hips. Like, their Thomas test is bad. They have poor hip flexor length. They have very little hip external or internal range of motion. And most trainers would be like, oh, you're really stiff in your hips. We got to work on hip mobility. So they're going to bark up that tree. We're going to work hip mobility, stretch. When really they're so unstable, they have little core stability. So, and that everything is perceived as tight because it's protective tension. Yeah. So because they're so unstable in their core, proximal stability is poor. Everything else is kind of firing at all cylinders because that's the only form of stability they have. So that everything's like clenched up really tight, and it's protective tension. So if I can get them to just turn the core on with some positional breathing drills, dead bugs. I love dead bugs. Yeah. Bird dogs done correctly. Get forceful exhales. Get them to turn those deeper core muscles on. Almost always, I'll retest their hip external internal rotation or retest whatever, and I almost always see an improvement in degrees of range of motion. I didn't stretch anything, and it just proves the point that, listen, you're not tight because you're tight. You're tight because you're unstable, and your nervous system is telling everything to clench up as hard as it can because it's trying to get it from somewhere. So if we just work on your core stability, get you a little bit more stable, now we're going to have access to work those ranges of motion that you didn't have before, and then we can go train and use it and cement it, and then add 40 yards on your tee off. Like, who knows? So. Maybe 40 yards is aggressive. I don't know, but
you know what? It might be to make a blanket statement, but I guarantee some guys are getting 40 yards, guys and girls. Yeah. And I forget, I think it might have been Ben Shear that made the analogy of like standing on ice. You know, if you're standing on ice, you're going to go real tense and tight because you have no stability there. But you put yourself on solid ground, and you're much more free to move because you know you have the stability. And I think that's kind of what you're alluding to there. And
I think almost always, honestly, Jeff, like what was always perceived as tight or stiff or immobile. I can't really put a percentage on it, but quite more often than not, it's not even about being tight or stiff or immobile. It's just someone so unstable that they present that way, and they just need to get stronger. They need to turn the core on, and then you do that, and it doesn't take long. You know, you do it at the beginning of a session just to get access to that range of motion, and then we use strength training to control. So once we have access to it, we have to be able to control it. And then again, we use strength training to do that. And then we're moving from the right areas. We're actually turning stuff on that they never knew they had access to. And it kind of sells itself. Like people who are very timid in the beginning become like, whoa, like they're doing stuff 3 weeks later that they couldn't even imagine doing prior. And it sells itself. So it's cool stuff.
Yeah, and then once you're able to get that a little bit of that stability, that's when you can then start doing some more of the cool stuff, like the ball throws. And
you got to earn it. Yep.
Exactly. Earn the right to rotate. I think that's
because people will do. A lot of people just arbitrarily grab a med ball and start throwing it against the wall, and it looks like crap. They're not even getting motion from the right areas. Again, they're rotating through their lower back. They're not using their hips. Their shoulder blades in the wrong position. But we have to get people in the right positions by getting them more stable, and then we put them in those right positions, and then we go do the med ball stuff, and it's way different. And now they're actually getting some benefit out of it.
Right. And I think, you know, we've been talking a lot about the low back and the hips, and obviously you guys did a whole piece on the shoulder with your blueprint and everything. And so what are some of the things that you see with golfers and shoulders and maybe shoulder injuries? Because I feel like the shoulders are often kind of like the stepchild. You know, people come into the gym, they want to do the big lifts, they want to do the, you know, bench press or dumbbell presses or whatever, you know, maybe even some pull-ups. The gutsy ones will do some pull-ups. But I think that sometimes doing those smaller exercises and working on some of the specifics of the shoulders, the shoulder blades, how important is that stuff?
I would argue it's very important.
That's a good argument.
That is not a trick question. I think sticking with the demographic of golfers and Gen Pop golfers, which I assume is a lot of your audience, you know, the shoulder blades are kind of at the mercy of what your mid back is or is not doing. So if we talk about somebody who kind of has more of a rounded shoulder posture, what we would call kyphotic, their shoulder blades are going to be in a position that we would call anterior tilt. Like they're not going to be in a very stable position because we want those shoulder blades more adhered or flush against the rib cage. Because when they're there, then we can actually get shoulder blade movement that we're looking for. And when we're talking about shoulders, and then when we talk about overhead, you know, the ability to get your arms overhead, which in golfers they do, right? And that backswing, they have to have access to that overhead range of motion. You know, you have to have shoulder blades that do stuff. So upward rotation, posterior tilt, and protraction. So, and if someone's got a very kyphotic or rounded shoulder position and unable to extend their T-spine and get those shoulder blades in a better position to begin with, that swing is going to be kind of messy. And again, they're not going to be in proper position. So, that's why we use assessment, and we try to get those people in those better positions and get more T-spine extension, get those shoulder blades in a better position. Because then once they're there, then the shoulder blades are actually going to move, start in the right position, hopefully end in the right positions, and keep their shoulders healthy, of course, but then also improve their performance out on the golf course.
Yeah, you mentioned just the rounded shoulders, the kyphotic posture, and everything, and I think that goes hand in hand with the population that you're talking about. You know, a lot of these golfers are guys that are at a desk or are driving a lot, and I think it's important that we realize that, you know, not only do our workouts make a big difference on improving this stuff, but sometimes you just have to work on, just the awareness of what you're doing every single day. What are some of the tips or things that you give your clients in order to help facilitate that, offsetting that poor posture that they're typically in?
Well, I always tell them, like, what are you doing all day at work or at home? And a lot of times, I'm sitting a lot, I'm in front of a desk a lot. I'm kind of in that ball of flexion. Their shoulders are rolled forward. They got a forward head posture. Their pecs are really tight. Their upper back's weak. Their posterior chain's weak, meaning their hamstrings and the glutes. Their backside's pretty weak. And so I basically tell them, like, well, listen, you going to the gym and doing more exercises that promote more flexion in a position that you're already in all day isn't doing you any favors. So that's a big reason why I'm not a fan of a ton of crunches and a ton of sit-ups and lots of pressing and pull downs. I mean, I don't avoid them. I'm not saying to avoid them, but most people need to train the opposite of what they're in all day. So that's going to be backside. I mean, I think anytime we're looking to improve athleticism, power development, change of direction, speed, we're talking backside, glutes, erectors, hamstrings. I mean, don't get me wrong, we're training everything, but I tend to focus more on the stuff that people can't see. People tend, I'm not the first one to say it, but most people tend to focus on the mirror muscles, what they can see in the mirror, which is important. I'm not denying the fact that we still need to train them, but what's on the backside, what you can't see, is kind of where I tend to gravitate towards as far as, having that conversation with a lot of the golfers that I work with. Is train that backside. A lot of good things are going to happen because it is going to offset a lot of the sitting they do all day. It is going to improve their posture. It is going to get them more athletic. And all those are cool things that we're looking for.
Absolutely. Before we jump into kind of our final round of questions here, I got one last one for you.
Yeah.
I get this question all the time from people listening to the show or, kind of reading on the website or just, they read so much information out there and they want to know what are some of the main things that they should be doing just on a weekly basis. And let's stick with the general population golfer. They've got a job, they've got kids, how do they fit this all in? Or what kind of would you recommend maybe on a weekly basis? You don't have to go through day by day, but just kind of on a weekly basis, roughly what would you kind of suggest they really pay attention to? How much effort time should they make? Maybe be putting in?
So I think if I were to give general numbers of what minimal we should be shooting for, I think if you're not getting to the gym at least 3 times a week, what are we talking about? Like, come on, like we're talking 3 to 4, maybe 5 hours a week of exercise. I mean, I don't want to do the math in my head, but 7 days times 24 hours, whatever that ends up being, most people have 3 to 5 hours available in their repertoire, their daily repertoire to get some exercise in. So I think minimum 3 days a week of strength training, full body. So, I break it down into movements. And again, I'm not the first one to say this, but I generally rarely ever focus on specific muscle groups. It's more movements. So hip hinge, squat, single leg, upper body push, upper body pull. I think I might have said lunge already. Carry, core stability. And as what Chris Chase, who is now he was with the Warriors, now he's with the Memphis Grizzlies. He had a brilliant term that I heard him say last year. It was called the trainable menu. So my job as a strength coach, when I assess somebody, is to figure out someone's trainable menu. And again, speaking in general terms, I think most people, if they figure out their trainable menu, they think about it movement patterns, and each workout trying to hit those 6 to 7 categories that I just said, that they're going to be pretty well off. And then we're talking, I think most workouts should be about 60 minutes. I think as long as you're not the person that's like looking at your Instagram every set and like chatting away, like you can get some significant work done in 60 minutes. So we're talking about your warm up. Then you might be doing some pre-work, whether it's some light sprint work or jumping or med ball work. That's 5 to 10 minutes. And then the strength work itself is like the meat and potatoes. So we're talking 30, 35, 40 minutes. And then any kind of conditioning at the end. So you want to think about it as like a 5 to 10 minute finisher, whether you get on the Airdyne bike, whether you push the prowler for a little bit, you do some kettlebell swings, anything to get your heart rate up a little bit. We're talking 60, 75 minutes max. I think if people shot for those numbers, that good things will happen. And I say this a lot in some of the workshops that I talk about, because almost always people, trainers too, how many sets of reps should we do? And I just say, don't worry about like the ideal set and reps is 3 times 52. So if people get to the gym 3 days a week, 52 weeks out of the year, it doesn't matter. Good shit is going to happen. Like, train those movement patterns, do the 3 times 52, and I guarantee you, you will be a different person a year from that starting point.
I love it, man. You could mass market that 3 times 52.
I think I stole it from somebody. I just forget who it was. I'm using the Mike Boyle rule, where you give credit 3 times, and then after that, it's yours.
Then it's yours. So I like it. I love it. No, that was awesome. That was exactly what I was looking for, and I think exactly what a lot of people wanted to hear. Just kind of broke.
People make it harder than it has to be. Like, and I get that we can get in the particulars of like exercise order, sets and reps, and but just focus on those movement patterns: squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, carry. Do those, like pick. That the whole idea of choice is huge. Like, that's a very underrated component of program design and building competency and autonomy with people. Is like, people like choice. Mm-hmm. They like, you give them a choice between a goblet squat and a front squat. You choose it's a squat, and they're actually going to do it. Then I don't give a shit. Like they did a squat, and they did it 3 times a week. Like, that's fine. That's cool. Like, that whole idea of choice is huge.
That's fantastic. And that consistency part is so important.
Yep.
Love it.
That is, I think Eric Helms, who's a brilliant strength coach, when he talks about program design, he has this pyramid of like, the bottom is the base, and obviously the tip is the least important. I mean, they're all important, but the tip is the least important. That bottom base, you know what it is? It's adherence. The most important part of a program is adherence. Mm-hmm. And that's the base of any program. Like, the only program that's going to work is the one that people are going to stick to. So, again, I'm stealing from everyone, but
awesome. I love it. Just poaching. All right, man. Final questions. You ready?
Okay. I'm hopefully I'm prepared enough for this.
All right. First one, Caddyshack or Happy Gilmore?
Happy Gilmore all the way.
Nice. Any specific reason?
Well, my formidable years are in the 90s. So I feel like, any movie that's was made in the 90s is the one I'm going to gravitate towards. So, and that to me is arguably Adam Sandler's best movie. So I have to go with Happy Gilmore.
Agreed. That or Billy Madison. Toss it for me. Toss it. All right. If golf were like baseball and you got to pick a walk-up song when you're going to the first tee box. Yep. What's Tony Gentilcore's pick?
I would, just to mess with people, I will say Dream Lover by Mariah Carey. Just because they'd be like, what the hell is this? Because I always feel it would be brilliant. Like, if I were at a Major League Baseball game and some guy walked out to like Happy Birthday, like how hilarious would that be? I just think just pick a random song, like make it Nora Jones. Like, I don't know, just pick some. We're like, we don't need Metallica, we don't need AC/DC. Let's just go Mariah Carey, Dream Lover. And then we'll crush it that way.
Excellent choice. I'm pretty sure that's the only time we'll hear Dream Lover on.
I'm going to have a lot of 90s references here.
All right. If you got to play 18 holes with anyone in the world, past, present, or future, who would it be and where would you want to play?
And I think this is where I'm going to get a little bit sentimental. I would choose my grandpa, who passed away when I had to have been 5 or 6. I've always heard that he and I would have gotten along very well because he was very athletic, gregarious guy, and I know he was an avid golfer. He died on the golf course. He had a heart attack on the golf course. Back, like, again, I was very young, but I think I would choose him to play around the golf with, and I would choose the hometown golf course just to get to know my grandpa. I think that would be kind of a cool thing to do.
Yeah. Awesome answer. All right. What has you most excited, in where you are right now, what you're doing? You've got Core, you've got the blog, you've got everything. What has you most excited?
I would just like to keep the momentum going. That keeps me excited. I remember when I was at Krusty Sports Performance, we get 3 intern classes a year that would come in, of 5 to 6 interns. And almost always they'd be like, one of the questions that would be asked, like, well, how do I get to where you are in your career? What do I have to do? And I said, listen, I'm 15 years into my career, and I feel like I'm only just now starting to get it. Right. I feel dumb a lot of the time. And it just kind of gets it in their head. Like, it's going to take time. It's going to take experience. It's going to be developing some career capital. You're not going to do it in a year. Like, I just feel like people aren't patient enough. And I honestly, I just feel like I definitely feel like I'm in a good spot now. Like, I'm at a point in my career where I don't have to be coaching 50 hours a week anymore, which is great. Like, I still want to be coaching. I don't want to be the guy that's writing about, here's how you train people, and then I'm not actually training people. Right. I think that's very hypocritical. And then there's a lot of people that do that, and it drives me bonkers. It's still important to me to still be coaching real life people in person. And I'm doing that at my own gym in a kick-ass city. It's pretty cool. So, and I get to travel around the world, and people read my shit, which is always mind-boggling. Like, there's inklings of like whether or not I want to grow it and do a 2.0, and my wife and I kind of combining forces, because she's a psychologist and does a lot of mindset work and behavioral and exercise psychology, and she's very much exercise minded. So there's that we're kind of toying around with. So it's kind of cool to have options. And I'm excited about that.
Yeah. It sounds like there's possibly a lot of cool things on the horizon.
Yeah.
It's kind of a nice place to be, being able to figure out where you want to go, take your time.
But it's all under the umbrella of working your ass off. Like, I don't belabor that at all. Like, I think, again, it's about being patient, I'm not saying that to say it. Like, I literally feel I'm only now just starting to get like things, and from a business standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, and from being a good coach standpoint, it's like, I don't know, there's some kind of Venn diagram. Hopefully now I'm kind of like combining all 3 of those things. I feel like I'm kind of in the middle of that Venn diagram right now.
I totally understand exactly where you're coming from, man.
Good.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Tony, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
and I can't encourage everybody that's listening to the show enough to go check out your website. Where can everybody find you? And then if you could leave us with the last piece of advice for the audience.
Yeah. Home base for me is my website, TonyGentilcore.com. That's my blog. It's my podcast appearances, it's articles I've written, it's everything. So that just go there, and people can get as much Tony Gentilcore as their heart desires. Now you're looking for a piece of advice.
Yeah.
You said?
Yeah.
Oh man, geez.
Last one you got.
I think I always gravitate to the same one because it's just a quote that I use quite often. Especially when I get people who come in and observe and shadow me for the day. It's like you have 2 ears and 2 eyes and 1 mouth. Use them in that order. Again, I don't know where I stole that quote, but it's definitely one that it's a mantra of mine. Like I feel I'm a pretty middle of the road kind of guy. Like I don't veer too far to the right or left on any. There's a time and place for everything. There's all about context. I try to keep an open mind, and I really don't like it when people are very dead set on this is my way. You're wrong if you're not doing it my way. Shut up and learn from other people. So the 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth quote is one I've always liked.
I love it, man, and I love your approach because I've read it in many of your articles that there's always so much. There's so many people that are on the side of the fence, one side or the other. A lot of times the answer lies somewhere in between. And you very much promote that and kind of give give reasons.
I'd like to think
for
so.
Both sides. You absolutely do.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
And I also get, how passionate you are and how much, you're having fun with your riding and everything, and that comes out in your riding. So just kudos to you for doing an excellent job. So.
Yeah, I try not to, when you're talking about like shoulder assessment and femoral acetabular impingement, you gotta throw in some cultural references and keep people engaged. People have the attention span of like 7 seconds nowadays. So the fact that anyone reads an entire article is impressive. So if I can keep their attention, then by just being a little bit kooky, then I'll run with it.
Well, excellent work, man. Tone, thanks for coming on, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you very much in the near future.
Yeah, I'd love to come back on. Thank you for having me.
Got it. Thanks for joining us again this week on the 18 Strong podcast. If you want any more information about Tony, his riding, anything, just go to 18strong.com and look up episode number 148, or search for Tony Gentilcore or just Tony in the search bar, and his episode will pop right up. We'll have links to his website, to his different products, so you can check all that stuff out. Another quick shout out to our sponsors of today's episode, PGA Tour mobile app and radroller.com. We always appreciate their support, and that's what allows us to keep this show going on the airwaves, as well as your support. Can't thank you enough. If you want to join us in some conversations outside of the podcast, go over to Facebook and join our private Facebook group, the 18 Strong Movement, where we continue all of our conversations and invite all the listeners, all the people that have been on the show, anybody that wants to join us and join the conversation are welcome to join the group. And of course, we appreciate all the ratings, reviews for the show. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you're listening, of course, that only helps spread the word of 18 Strong. We appreciate you being here. We will catch up with you next week. Train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.
Thanks for listening to the 18 Strong podcast at www.18strong.com. And remember, train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.